We don't spend 5 years on producing a new model.
Just pulling your leg.
I know. 36 months is the normal production, but we're cutting it down to 24 months. Part of that is extensive road testing, which was difficult to shorten. But I've listened to the presentations, and it's interesting. We don't share the thing about having small cars in the city center and larger cars. We think cars can be part of mobility everywhere. We think that you can have flexibility, and you can have cars that can come into city centers, picking up passengers all the way along, and much more flexible than perhaps. So I think there's a need to even go from outside of city centers into city centers, and that in combination with smaller vehicles. So some of I don't share the whole view of what was coming, but a lot of this is true, of course. One comment to this, I think this gentleman about the. Someone talked about pedestrians and what are we going to do with pedestrians and city traffic. I think it was you, Dr. Markovic. I think I think this thing with pedestrian safety is a combination of things in the car and what the infrastructure does. So I think we have a cooperation with the Swedish government. We said, how are we going to take pedestrian accidents down to zero, pedestrian fatalities? And we divided the responsibilities in up to 40 kilometers an hour. We take the responsibility to save the pedestrians. Above 40, we say separate the pedestrians from from traffic. So we're trying to build in systems in the vehicles that protect pedestrians, observing pedestrians and braking for them to save them. And above 40, the infrastructure do this. That's a couple of comments.
Okay, just to get us started. I just want to ask each of you, there is a tweet asking, will you still drive your car in a couple of years, or will the car take you places? And that leads me to a question related to how far do you think we have come? We heard from Rupert in the first session. He was very optimistic. He said even without infrastructure, some of the other challenges I hope we'll have time to discuss, we can do a lot with what we've already got. My question to you all really is, would you agree with that? And to those of you, many of you have worked in this sector for many, many years. And we go back, I was very struck by the going back to 1991. What lessons do you draw from your past experience as to how we can accelerate progress in future? So how far can we go with what we've got? Where are the gaps? And some lessons. Anybody want to? Rainer, please.
Yes, let me start. My personal belief is that we cannot rely on the public to actually fund all this, right? We have seen plenty of examples how to actually increase mobility with specific systems that have to be newly built, infrastructure that has to be paid for, and all that good stuff. Our view of the disruptive change through autonomous vehicles is more that if we provide enough experience, enough fun, enough convenience, then consumers that are already buying cars today will actually pay for all this.
Okay.
And this is a kind of a sliding scenario that leads us into the future beyond 2025, when all these systems will come together and merge. But there will be an intermediate stage where cars have to be a personality of their own. They need to take part, like the drivers in an unstructured traffic situation.
Because that is a good, interesting question. When you talk about automation, you know, how the driver perceives that. You know, do they still see cars as fun? Do they still see cars as an object they want to have? This personality question, Mike, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because if a car becomes automated, in a sense, it's taken over from you. And I was very struck. A lot of the tweets that we've been having, one tweet was intelligent vehicle technology should focus on enhanced customer driving experience and adding the human factor. How do you think the human factor in all of this responds to these developments? Just given your role as representing the consumers in all of this.
Yeah, it's also a broad field. If you look into road safety, well, people think themselves, I'm driving safe, so I don't need it. That's one part of the thing. If I look to the pilots and we ask people, will you use connected applications after the pilot? They say, okay, I want to use them. And it's other kind of functionalities they are really value, like how much fuel do I use, how can I find my car? It's an old-fashioned functionality, but they are really valuing it. And of course, if they get breakdown information, What's the voltage of my battery at this moment? They also value it very much.
So it's got to be fun, but it's also got to be useful. Otherwise, they won't take it up. We'll come back on that question and the who pays in a little while. But Michelle, a perspective from you, going back to 1991, how far have we come? Do you think, like Rupert, that we can do a great deal with what we've already developed? And what, for you, are the key lessons of the last 20-odd years?
The key lesson is that everything takes a lot of time, and especially changes in the behavior of people. And if they are not exposed to these new technologies, they won't ask for it. People never ask for a mobile phone, okay? People never, I remember my father-in-law, who was a director of marketing at Thomson, told me a very funny story. In the 50s, you know, they made a very big marketing study about what is the use of having a transistor, you know, transistor radio. I said, nobody wanted a transistor. I have a radio at home. I don't need a transistor radio. You see, it's very difficult to anticipate the reaction of the public to a new technology. They have to be exposed to it and see what is the benefit. If they are not, if they cannot touch it, they cannot try it, they won't see it. Once we had in Paris the Autolib system, we have now something like 200,000 people registered for the service. 200,000. You say this is enormous, okay? And it's very new. So once you see it and you can try it, and you have to push it a little bit at the beginning. You know? Okay, try it for free. And that is going to change the paradigm.
So hence the importance of the iMobility Challenge, which
Exactly.
has been exactly about not only just telling them about it, but letting them have a go and see it for themselves. Damien, this question, he said, you know, it takes a long time. These innovations take a long time. You've been showing there how fast you can do something. So how generally do we speed this process up? And a word, if you would, to, I'm thinking when it comes to consumers and the benefits, what have you been able to test customer motorists' reaction to the 3D printed car, and whether they think, well, that looks very clever, but I'm not sure I want to actually, you know, get in one. What's the consumer reaction to it, or is it too early to say?
So I think for the 3D printed car, it's a little bit too early to talk about it. But related to the autonomous vehicle,
yeah.
I think there's definitely also a gap between generations, between the generation that were brought up with, you know, connected devices in their hands right from their baby cribs, and you know, somebody
Driving
that
is a distraction.
Sorry?
Driving is a distraction.
Well, driving is a distraction from what you want to be doing, exactly. And you know, my generation that learned how to drive a car with a gear shift, you know, it is irrelevant for my kids to learn how to drive today. Why for? Today, in urban areas, we already see people that don't live with a car. It's a burden. You know, owning a car is a burden. So how do we invent new type of mobility services that enable them to be mobile without having the burden of owning their vehicles?
So going very much back to that question of our models of ownership will change and all of those things. I just wanted to build a little bit in terms of discussing where we go from here about this take-up question. I'll come back to the consumers in a little while and their reaction to it all. But in terms of the technical challenges, the innovations that we need, Mike mentioned earlier these open in-vehicle telematic platforms, absolutely crucial. If we do not have access to the data, efficient access to it, if we don't have open platforms, then none of this can work effectively and for the real benefit of the motorist for all it is. But what do you see as the key challenges from a technical point of view, first of all, in terms of building on the progress we've made to date? Are there gaps? Where is further work needed? Or are most of the challenges, do you see them on the policy side, the budget side, etc.? We'll come back. But are there technical challenges we still need to realise? Please.
Yeah. We still have technical challenges. It's difficult to put fully automatic. I don't like the word autonomous because autonomous means that you don't have any connection. Okay, autonomous means you're just yourself. We are working towards automated driving with a lot of communication, a lot of cooperation. So one of the major challenge I see is the human factor. How do we interact? Pedestrians, cyclists, how do they interact with this automated vehicle? And how does the driver, is there still a driver, or the user, if he doesn't drive, how does you interact with the vehicle? It's going to be a complete paradigm change. And there is a lot of work to be done on this human-machine interface. But just one thing, I'll make an example, you know. If you have an automated vehicle in a city and then you have a crossing, pedestrian crossing,
Yep.
and then you have an old lady, you know, who is trying to cross, the automated vehicle will see, okay, we can see that there is a pedestrian, we know that there is a crossing, so we will wait for the old lady to cross, okay? And then the lady will do like this, okay? Go ahead. I don't know any system that can recognize this.
So this is for you the crucial, the human factor. And as we say, in terms of how you respond to a car, how you take account of behaviour, unpredictable behaviours by those around the car. Rainer, for you, is that a central area where we need more work? Is there something else you would highlight?
I agree that the human-machine interface is a critical factor, specifically when we are not fully autonomous or fully automatic
Can
yet.
you lift the mic up a little bit? I don't think
Okay.
it's picking you up very well. There we are.
So when you look at Wikipedia, you will find that there are 5 levels of automatic driving, right? And what we are talking about here is the level 5, where you just get into the car, announce where you want to go, and the car takes you there, right? It does everything for you, and you don't even need a driver's license. So you can spend the 2K euros that it costs you to get a driver's license against the purchase of that car, right? However, to get there, we will probably start at level 3, where certain situations will be automated, like highway driving, a technology that is, by the way, mastered since the 1990s, and is mastered very well. And if you talk to the guys who are not in the city, right, the guys who are doing long-distance driving like I do, they would love such a feature. And these features are becoming available right now. So
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate, and Mike commented this. I like driving. I enjoy the act of driving. It's something that gives me a lot of pleasure. Now, it may be that many young people don't, but there are people, and I'm going back to the point about it needs to be fun and so on. What do you do about that? If you take all the enjoyment out and it becomes very functional, is that an issue? But more broadly, this question, would you see, you talked a lot about the usability of these systems. Would you see this interface between the intelligent system and the human as one of the crucial challenges for the future?
Well, I think it's very important. And I think in loving to drive, you always have, I think, possibilities and opportunities next to the public life. Like my son is now driving also cars on private fields. And he's not 18, so he can manage this, this emotion. And I think you will always have this choice to have this kind of mobility being used.
Okay. Damien, for you, the key challenges for the future, you showing the speed at which you are developing these new things. What are the challenges to turn all of this into something on the road so we really do maximize the benefits of all of
We
this?
talked a lot about regulation and how legislation is evolving to enable those technology to hit the market. So I think one of the key challenges to address this one, I think it takes leadership. It takes leadership to enable those technologies to be brought to market. There are some states in the United States and some countries that are taking steps to enable those technologies, those autonomous vehicles, to get on the road. And I think those are the states, the countries that are understanding the potential of transformation of those technologies, how impactful those technologies are, and are building the environment for those technologies to come to market.
And what sort of steps do you think, I mean, if you look around the world at initiatives being taken, would you highlight any in particular as being most successful?
Close to here, you've got the Netherlands. There is the Automotive Campus in Eindhoven that have state-of-the-art R&D facility, you've got the portion of street or a road that is fully automated or fully fitted with sensors, so the startups and companies that want to work in the field have a great test bed right there.
Right.
So I think it is taking the steps to enable those technologies to market that are really the important steps to take.
Okay. Anders, you talked in the plenary session about, and I'd like you, because we have a bit more time now, perhaps if you wanted to expand at all in terms of the hurdles you see, the challenge from a regulatory point of view. We've heard about the Vienna Convention and having to be in charge of your horse or your vehicle at all times. I do think it's truly wonderful that we still have a piece of legislation like that on our statute books. But what for you is the main challenge, to address these liability issues, this control of the vehicle, or is it something else? Is it more technical?
Well, the Vienna Convention is still a major hurdle, and we don't think the updates that are being discussed, and I think they did an update earlier this year in Vienna. We don't think that goes enough. It takes all the way to get there. There needs another update, and it's been very frustrated discussions in Geneva about the Vienna Convention. There are also some national laws saying that you're not allowed to do secondary tasks in the vehicle. It's basically going to be a hurdle for adopting automated vehicles or rolling out the automated vehicles. I would like to challenge Damien again. Sorry.
It's debate. That's what we want.
Sorry about that. The states in the United States who adopted the testing laws are actually making it worse for car manufacturers to this, because in the United States and other places in Europe, if nothing is not prohibited, it's legal. So the states that have nothing in the US basically allow this already. So the states are doing this, they make it worse because they're putting up very, I would say, testing laws that are very, very difficult to comply with, unreasonably difficult. So we don't think that's a good development. But fortunate for us, what the attention in the US has turned away from testing of automated vehicles and going for marijuana laws instead, because they thought that was much more, there was more business into legalizing marijuana than testing of automated vehicles.
Okay.
But I think there are major hurdles in Europe still, and Vienna Convention is one of them. There are the test I'm describing in Sweden. We had all the exemptions necessary to do automated vehicles on those public roads. So we have a good cooperation in Sweden. But as Mr. Cooling was saying in my video, a lot of this is not possible to do in many places in Europe, and there are a lot of things that have to be taken away to do this. And we know that legislation takes a long time. It's time to start now to do this.
Okay, Rainer, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Anders is saying. Type approval is just one side of the medal. The other side is liability law, and this is where the US are certainly much more restrictive than what we see here in Europe. I mean, you can probably ask the question, why is there such a gap between Google and General Motors and Ford and Chrysler? I mean, when you go to technical conferences, you will see that the American car makers are not making that great of a progress in terms of automated driving as the Europeans are. On the other hand, you have this singularity called Google, which is kind of charging ahead and putting a huge distance between them and the traditional.
And why, Ran, if I could stay with you on that, why do you think that gap is opening up?
Because General Motors understands liability.
Right.
Period.
Okay, let's go out and get a first round of questions or comments from the floor. And I've got lots of issues I want to follow up with you on, but let's take some questions or indeed comments to what you've heard. Yes, please, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Grusemann from TÜV Rheinland, and I would like to follow up on the issue of liability. With the complex technology that these automated vehicles have on board, and also the fact that they have to rely on external data flowing to the vehicle, how do the manufacturers really anticipate this issue of liability, of product liability, and how can you kind of draw a line between what is external liability and within the vehicle? And then, of course, the driver still, or the people on board, maybe still play a role in the whole context. And then a question that adds to that, if you say that, for example, accidents are caused to over 90% by human errors, and these could be eliminated in the future. Does that mean for the insurance industry that our premiums will drop by 90% as well?
We don't have anyone from the insurance industry on the panel, but it's a very good question. I'll just see if there are any more before we come back. So new business models for the insurance sector as much. I think that was implied in the opening plenary. This question, Anders, is a very specific one about liability. Could you pick up on that?
Well, liability is truly a challenge. But I think I'd like to add one more thing. It's not just liability, it's the trust, people's trust in the systems, which goes hand in hand with liability. I mean, look what happens in the United States at the moment. People are starting distrusting airbags made by Takata. And people are saying, I wouldn't want to buy a car made with an airbag made by Takata because I don't trust it. If we put our systems on the road that start to be in newspapers saying, these systems failed, there was an accident because the system failed, that's going to hit us much more than any liability. But in addition to that, we think liability is important with who's liable, because we want to give the customers a chance to do other things. And if we say the customer is still liable, if you hand over the control to the vehicle, but the driver is still liable, well, no one is going to buy these systems. So it's important that we assume liability, because the whole business model depends on who's liable. So for us, it's very, very important to make the system so safe that we can give this trust to consumers, and liability is not a factor for us when we launch these systems on public roads. So, and that goes hand in hand with the insurance thing, because when we probably going to take away all the small crashes, all the fender benders, all the small crashes that makes business for the insurance companies. We're going to have, maybe we're going to have some major breakups, malfunctions, where the whole thing is just collapsing. And that is no business for insurance companies. So we are spending lots and lots of time on looking at all these things and trying to make, one thing to address this is to have redundancies, of course. Redundancies, when one system fails, you have another system taken over, and have a safe approach to every situation. That if the car enters a situation which is difficult, make an approach where the car can deal with it, even if one system breaks down. One more thing, Jackie. We think the automated vehicle will be very polite. It will always drive itself in a legal manner, and will be very cautious about the situation, much more than normal drivers. So we will have a much nicer vehicle, because we don't think people will be so stressed in the vehicle if they can do other things. A person sitting in a vehicle, moving slower than normally, but still can use the time, you will not be objecting to that as much as you do if you're driving yourself and want to get to work.
Okay.
You're ready doing the work.
I like the idea of a polite vehicle. Michelle, you wanted to come in.
Going into this polite thing, I just read a comment from Armstrong at Google saying that they have to build in their vehicles some aggressiveness and some politeness, because otherwise most of the time the car won't move. At an intersection, it will never go through. You know, if it's too polite, if it addresses exactly the rule of the road. So yeah, you have to build it. But I want to come back to this fully automated system, and it's not the car; it's a system. It's very important. And we have automated system, fully automated system, like the metro systems, you know. They are certified, and there is liability, of course, but there is no accident, you know, in this system. But it's very difficult to certify this system. It takes a lot of time, and this is what we will come to. And actually, when we go in this City Mobile demonstration, we look at the system. It's not just the car. It's not the car that is certified. It is the system. And the system is the car, it is the infrastructure, it is the management system, it is the operation of the system, and it's the people around. It's a whole system that we have to certify. And we do that, and we look at the system in detail. We certified the vehicle, of course, according to a machinery directive, for example, or some standards that do not really yet exist. We can certify the vehicle, but it is very important to certify the whole system. And we can look at that, and we are developing actually some what we call use cases, so we can certify little pieces of the system, but we have to certify the whole thing. And we do, and we do.
I like your point about the over-polite vehicles. And I was thinking about your lady who says go. I have the opposite problem. I learned to drive in the UK, and we have an absolute rigid rule about a zebra crossing. If a pedestrian is anywhere near it, we stop and we wait. In Belgium, people like to stand and chat on the edge of zebra crossings. And the very polite Jackie is going, are you? So how cars are going to make all those judgments? And as you say, it could lead to gridlock if everyone's being over polite. But
and there is another more dangerous situation. It is when a policeman does this. We cannot recognize this with the vision system.
But with more intelligence, but Rainer, you were talking earlier about that you need a more intelligent car for these intelligent systems. Will it be able to do that?
In this case, I'm a complete positivist, right? I have just seen a paper presented at a conference about trajectory prediction of pedestrians, right? So,
but the policeman who says,
okay, let's pick it one by one. A specific policeman detection is as simple as traffic sign recognition. I'm completely sure for that.
Okay. Okay. I want to just come to a broader question. I'll come back out to you all in a little while. But in terms of, we are talking here and we have heard, and you are all in the innovation business and remarkable innovations. What for you, we've talked a little bit about regulation, about legislation as a driver or a hindrance to innovation, but more broadly, if you are going to be able to be as innovative, Damien, as you have been so far, what do you need? What is the business environment? What are the drivers for you of effective innovation? And does the ecosystem work now? Does it need to be improved? A thought from all of you on this broad question of what makes an innovative environment to deliver these benefits.
So I've talked about leadership, and basically it is having the local stakeholders to support the innovation, bringing the innovation to market. So it's about having the different stakeholders to understand the potential, and I think what have been shared today just opened the eyes on the possibilities of autonomous and connected vehicles. Now it's about getting to market. It's about bringing that to and putting it in the hands, not through just a few prototypes, but in a larger scale, have people really embrace the new technologies. You've said it very well, Michel. People need to touch it, feel it, understand it, so that they can adopt it. So one of the enablers is to have local stakeholders to be part of the change. This is what happened with the demonstration with the 100 vehicles locally. You have the legislators or the bypasses to make that possible. And this is what needs to happen.
But they also, Mike, they have to have, and particularly motorists, have to have trust. Going back to your issue about data and data protection and access to data, you have to build a trusting environment, do you not, for all these innovations to be taken up, to be deployed, to actually work?
Yeah, I think we are now in a crucial period that we can't make faults on that area. So all the parties, the key players, have to be very cautious with it. And but I mean, at the same time, it was my last slide who showed that people, they want to share the data with more than one player. So I think the basic attitude is that they trust other parties, and there must be no misuse in this critical period. I think.
Well, so maybe the drivers trust at the moment, but there's also the trust between different manufacturers, between car manufacturers, between developers of infrastructure. Lots of people need to trust each other to make these innovations work, don't they? And you mentioned standards. I'm surprised it hasn't come up as a word before. How much of an issue do we still have with standardization in these areas, Michel? I know you wanted to come in anyway, but a thought on this environment that really works.
Standards are crucial for the manufacturer or the service provider, so that if they meet the standard, then they are less liable. So this is a key element. So we have to develop the standards, and we do develop the standard. I take part actually of several ISO committees on the standardization of automated vehicle, robots. There is a standard that has come up last year for service robots, And in the service robot, we have these tiny little cyber cars. The automotive sector has other committees to work on that, and they do work on it. They have some standards already on some driving assistance, lateral lane keeping, longitudinal ACC, and parking. These standards are coming out. So it will be much simpler for the manufacturer to address the liability issues once they say, okay, we have certified our system or our vehicle according to this standard.
So perhaps an element of standardization that we don't normally look at. We've talked a lot, Rainer and Anders, already about business models. In terms of a business model and the question of how do you drive innovation, there was a question in the first session about the business model of the future, which you did pick up on for vehicle manufacturers. If, as has been predicted by some, we may be at the peak of ownership, where will the value come from? What do you see as the key drivers of innovation, and to make it profitable for companies like you and like Anders' company?
Okay, maybe a quick revert to the standards question is probably in order here. Standards make sense in a pre-competitive environment.
Yeah.
Because if you, with a standard, you would destroy, if it was in a competitive or innovative environment, you would destroy pretty much the business model of these innovative small companies, right? But there is plenty of stuff left that makes sense to standardize. If you look at the car, the software is a typical environment where you can cut down the cost through standardization, and you can increase the speed of development. A typical example is the Genevi system for in-vehicle infotainment. There are plenty of standards for what we call video analytics, because this is a scientific field which is now coming into the car. And in order to make use of scientific stuff, you have to simplify it somehow. You have to bring it down to software libraries, to software functions that automotive developers who have no idea about video analytics from a scientific point of view, they can use it, okay? So the chrono standards like OpenVX is a typical example that are readily deployed, basically out of nowhere. People are already using it. And another standard is maybe the compute platform. If you look around, autonomous cars exist today, but only as prototypes. And they have the trunk full of PCs. And the challenge is now, how do you get from this trunk full of PCs to an affordable embedded platform? And this is where standards for development tools, standards for compute platforms come into play, such that people can basically turn this over in the 18 months or so, right? That you mentioned, Anders, before.
Right. So if we don't address these standards issues, we'll never get there. What do you think, Anders? Sorry, we're sharing a bit between. I've got two here, so why don't we put one more of these into the mix?
I hate to be the one who has a different opinion about everything in this panel.
That's what debate is all about, so I welcome it.
I don't think standards are good and normal, but when it comes to standard legal requirements, we don't think this is going to help us with the liability issues at all, because we think what we're doing now is going from legal requirements that set up a typical set of requirements. So if you crash a car, for instance, and that performs well in that crash, you know it's going to be good in the real life. It's going to protect the occupants. For an automated vehicle, that has to deal with everything. All the situations, you can't just rely on a limited set of typical situations. The car has to deal with everything. So we don't think the liability is going to go away even if you have certification or standards. We have to, as car manufacturers, we have to look at everything. And even if we've done everything when it comes to the legal requirements, certification, and filling standards, there are going to be many, many other issues we need to deal with. So the responsibility lies with us, and we have to deal with this in a way that's very responsible. And we have to do extensive road testing, make sure that we have so much experience that we can deal with most things. And if we can't deal with something, then it's the safe approach, take the car off the road in a safe way, which we call the safe harbor modes. I'm sorry for
No, absolutely. And in terms of the broader question of the drivers of innovation and the business model that for vehicle manufacturers will make these investments, because there's huge investments in R&D that have already been made and more to be made in future. What for you are the key elements of an environment that makes that innovation profitable?
Well, we have to have something to offer the customers, of course. And so it's got to be clear to the customers this is something they want. We talked about, Damon and I both talked about connectivity. Being connected, being able to do something, we offer you something. We have a good example in technology we had, and we had some of the automated, the active safety technologies we had for years have been difficult to get the penetration up in our cars because they've been optional equipment. We added some more features to that same package. We packaged these things in a way that was very attractive for customers. And the penetration went up overnight because there was something that customers wanted. So how can we make this into something that customers want? There's something that's attractive for them, something they want, and say, okay, there's something I can do because I have this. They're willing to buy it. And also, I think the future, I talked about what's going to be ownership in the future. If you can order a car according to specification you want now, for instance, for carpooling, I want this car, I want these features on it, I can order it for this time, I'm willing to pay for it now. I think that's going to be very much part of the future. Customized driving.
Okay,
is
but
good
which
part.
brings us back to the point somebody made earlier about customers don't always know what they want until they see it. So you need to raise awareness of its existence and the benefits before they will say they want it. But we'll come back. I want to come back on that crucial question of how you increase take-up. We've talked about the take-up from the side of the policy challenge, but among motorists, and whether it's about more than simply raising the awareness. Are there certain incentives we need or whatever? Also want to come back on the fundamental. We've sort of skirted around it so far of the cost, infrastructure and so on. But let's see, before we do that, whether there are any more questions or comments from our audience. Does anybody want to join in the debate? Or are you enjoying watching me grill them? Okay. Yes, hang on. Gabriel, one there and one on that side, I think. Thank you, Charles. Gabriel.
Thank you. Gabriel Simcic from the FIA. I'm actually coordinating the iMobility Challenge. I'd like to understand the difference between the cyber car that Michel was presenting and the idea that Anders was presenting of a conventional car that drives autonomously. Are they competing or are they complementary for different scenarios?
Okay. Is your cyber car effectively the same thing renamed, or do they compete? Are they complementary? Michel, if you pick up on that straight away, if you would, and then I'll come over.
Yes, yes. Actually, we use the same technologies. We use the same sensors. We use the same actuators to make the car drive by itself. But the environment is very different. We don't want to drive everywhere, every time. Okay? We offer a service, which is a urban transportation service for small distances, and the system is tailored for this service. It's not for going everywhere, anytime. Okay? It's for a particular service. If it snows, the service will stop. Okay? So, and there is someone in charge of making sure that the service runs efficiently and safely. Okay? So it's very different from a car that you buy and then you try to turn on. So maybe sometime it will accept to work autonomously and sometime not, but we don't know exactly what is the environment. So it's much more difficult, I would say, to run a standard car with somebody behind the wheel who wants to run it autonomously or automatically. This is similar, actually. I come from the robotics business, the industrial robotics. In the beginning, we wanted to have robots to do exactly the same thing as the human on a factory. It didn't work. The bin picking, for example, which has led to hundreds of theses, how to pick up a part to put it on a machine to be machined, never worked. So now we simplified the problem and we put the part properly on a pallet.
Okay.
Okay? Same thing with the automation. We work on the simplest case. There are actually even simpler cases like stop-and-go driving. Okay? Stop-and-go driving on a highway is a very simple case for automation. It's very useful. And now it's coming. It's coming. But the problem is for the car manufacturer to decide when to accept it. Accept, when you turn it on. Will you put it on, if you are in a rural road?
Okay, so when it comes to your cars...
In our system, we know exactly when and where we will turn it on.
Right, and that's the basic difference. Let me
just and also, we only do it at very low speed at the moment.
Okay, any other questions before we come back? And yes, Hang on a minute. Let me just move that before. Thank you, please, sir. Thank you.
Safety before. Olivier Lenz from the FIA. I have a question about, again, to Anders, about the liability. You say that in future, some manufacturers will take up liability for the safety of the autonomous car. But the question that I am asking myself, I mean, owning a computer and hearing from the software producer that at some point they don't support anymore certain software. So what will happen to my car? Will I just be told by the manufacturer, okay, that's it, we don't support it anymore? Until when does this liability continue? Is there an end to it?
Okay, thank you. And that's actually a broader question about as you develop. We all know from our iPhones and smartphones and so on, suddenly you discover that you can't use it for certain things. Cars have quite a long shelf life. They can be on the roads for many years. How are we going to deal with that as things change? But comment to that. Who can help us? Anders first? Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, if we assume the first step of automation would be something called level 3 cars, which are partially autonomous or automated. These cars you will have possibility to drive yourself for part of the time, and you get a signal. You can now go leave the control to the vehicle. For that type of car, of course, you can always drive yourself. If all the systems fail, you just go back to normal driving. So there's no difference with the car you have today. So the car will not be unsafe. Also, we will have responsibility for the software until the car is basically ready to be scrapped. We develop our own software, so it's liability on the manufacturer to have a software that's always available for any updates. Also, what I said before is very important. We have redundancies all the time, so we're not just depending on one software. It's not just like your computer that breaks down and it just goes and you have to reboot it. This has a number of redundancies that if one system fails, there are a number of other systems that can cover up for this. Also, in this transparency with the driver. So if something is not available, for instance, the radar is blocked, there's a communication to the driver, and we have in the project we're running now, we have a way of dealing with the interaction back and forth with the driver. So if there's a need for the driver to assume control back.
Okay.
If the driver, we check in the driver. If the driver's ready, we'll hand the control up to the driver. If the driver's not ready, we take the car off the road and leave it at the safe place next to the side of the road, the shoulder.
Thank you. Anybody want to add anything on that, Rainer?
Yes, I just wanted to add, if you compare your computer at home and the software that runs on it with a car, it would be fairer to compare the car with an airplane, for instance. Those are similar systems, and the development of software and hardware is adhering to strict rules in both cases, in the automotive case and in the aerospace case. While, on your smartphone and your computer at home, there is no single entity that takes responsibility for the configuration of software and hardware, unless you take it over.
There is a tweet that relates to this that links nicely to what I want to talk about now, which I mentioned earlier in the first session about what ITS experts themselves have said about what the key barriers are to progress in terms of iMobility. And they talked about the financial aspects, cost of equipment, installation, maintenance, update. So that's one element of cost. The other element of cost is, and we've talked about it quite a lot, the infrastructure. Now, we heard earlier from Rupert, he said we can do a lot without the infrastructure, but clearly to get the maximum benefit out of intelligent mobility, intelligent transport systems, we need this investment in the infrastructure, and predictions are it could be huge. Mike, could I come to you first, because this really goes to the question of the motorist, the consumer, because I think to an extent, Rainer, if I understood you, you were arguing that if you make it fun, if you make it something people see the benefits of, and you've all talked about that, people will pay, but you also said you can't rely on the public to fund all of this. How do we pay for all the things that are needed, particularly the infrastructure, but also do you think for motorists, you said one of your focuses was lowering costs for the motorist, and we're hearing here from these ITS experts about costs of updates and maintenance and so on. Will they be prepared to pay them? So there's two sides to this. What about the rest of it, not the vehicle itself, but also the vehicle? How do you see motorist attitudes to that? How do we square this circle when we don't have very much public money to go around at the moment anyway?
I think the consumer can't oversee all the things which are changing, like the effects on insurance. Insurances would be cheaper in the future. But I think also there has to be made a step from governments, because if you can save people from having accidents, they're doing some cost savings too. So it's not only one party who does the investment, but you have to look for them all. Speaking about the experience we had, is that the consumer wants to make this start investment on the hardware. It's easy for him, but the monthly costs, that is something different, and that's where they're sensible for. So if it's costs on software or on maintenance or on smartphone costs coming back every month, that's a sensible spot for them.
Okay, and that links to a question, Damien. Yeah, let me just bring in a tweet which says users are hyper-connected, cars are connected. Will infrastructure be connected to a suggestion? The question is 3 speeds. Are we at the moment in a situation where many of you are working on these incredible innovations that we're seeing, but the other element, the infrastructure, is not keeping up, partly because of this cost issue?
There are definitely different rates of innovation, and I think the way we'll implement it, we'll find ways, innovative ways to implement new innovations. Just to add on, how can we have, who's paying for it? Who's paying for it? We talked about also the use of the vehicles and going from ownership to shared vehicles. I think that can also have a very big impact on the adoption of the technology. It will be the fleet operators of shared vehicles that will make the investment. They will see the advantage of those technologies. So I think it's not just on the infrastructure, not just on the users, but really on the operators of the mobility systems.
Okay, so you see them as a key element in the equation. Other thoughts on this question of who pays? Rainer?
If you go back to a bunch of examples of of innovation in the car just recently, you can pretty much detect the patterns and apply them to autonomous driving, automatic driving. For instance, telematics has a 100% fit rate in fleets and in trucks, right? And that happened over the last 10 years. Telematics is being funded by insurances. Thank you for that keyword. Insurance is a big driver for cross-funding innovation that leads to less accidents, of course, right? As I mentioned before, this liability shift away from insurances enables more free-floating money from the insurance side that can be invested in this area. Okay. Other than that, there is plenty of use cases that provide more fun. Like children putting the money together to buy a car for their old mother, such that she can still come for a visit in her own car. Right? I mean, that would be worth substantial.
Sort of mini crowd financing. we started at the very local level.
I don't want to even mention what we typically call the beer assistant in Munich, right? So when you are no longer legally safe to drive, when you come out of your favorite inn, you can put the car in full auto mode, right, and drive home. Let you be driven.
So
home.
the car, to use the Belgian context, becomes Bob. Michel, on this question of who pays, how do we meet the costs of all this?
Well, we have to realize, and I think the users do realize, maybe not to the full extent, that owning a car is very expensive. It costs you something around €500 per month. And if you shift your cost of ownership to a service, and if you are ready to pay roughly the same amount, then that's a huge amount of money that you give to service providers. And these service providers, they will pay for the infrastructure. The service provider can be the city also. The city is implementing services such as parking. Parking is a great service, that's provided by the city, usually in partnership with private companies. Okay, and it generates a huge amount of revenues.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have seen this morning that parkings are being equipped with sensors and with management systems and communication system with the smartphone. Pretty soon it will be with the car, and especially if you have mobility services. Then if you get, it will be like, perhaps it will be even included in your mobile phone bill, you know, the mobility service. And then you will pay for some mobility. If you want a bicycle shared, or a car share, or a carpool, or
So
whatever, the key will be the services. And the service providers, probably in a public-private partnership, because they will be using some of the infrastructure offered by the city, can make a lot of money, and they will invest in the infrastructure because they will run their service more efficiently.
Anders, two questions related to this. First, on the infrastructure question. I mean, obviously, the car industry, the vehicle industry, investing a great deal in the R&D to develop the intelligent cars. But they will only work to their maximum, although we did hear a lot can be achieved just by the cars talking to each other, if you have the infrastructure as well. So who pays for that? And secondly, this question of the consumer and their willingness to pay. I mentioned earlier this iMobility Challenge study, which showed, and I think you also mentioned, energy consumption, savings on energy consumption, they'll pay for. Safety, they'll pay for. They get a little bit more doubtful when you move beyond those two things. But so there is, even where there is awareness of some of these systems, varying degrees of willingness to pay. So from a business model point of view, how do you square that circle?
First of all, the way we've seen it now, the type of vehicles that we run in this project, the additional hardware needed for that vehicle costs about 2,000 euros. So it's not that extensive. And for the infrastructure, we think we don't use vehicle-to-vehicle communication. We use vehicle-to infrastructure. So it's cloud-based information. So you can, with a central control center, control center, you can send all this information. You can use basically the traffic flow control center for the same service. So the cloud service it basically doesn't cost very much. The equipment in the vehicle doesn't cost very much, and the infrastructure doesn't need to be changed very much for this type of driving, this type of automated driving that we're talking about in this project. So we don't see any extensive cost linked to this. And when you ask consumers that question, if you're willing to pay 2,000 euros for something that can enable you to use the time in the vehicle, to lower your insurance premiums, to maybe improve your fuel economy, if you give them the full picture, we think they're willing to pay for that.
Okay. Can I just ask you one other question related to business models? Because Damien talked about it in his presentation, but we haven't had a chance to discuss it. This question of micro-factories, this idea that the production should be where the cars will be sold. This is the way of the future. This is how it's going to have to be done. Would you agree with that? Do you see that as part of the answer for the future?
No.
Tell me why.
Well, because part of product development, there's so much being done when it comes to testing the way we do with vehicles. I've been part of myself very much when we developed some of the system for pedestrian detection, for instance. We're taking that to every major city in the world to update it, work on the software. I've been part of driving myself in places like Tokyo and New York City to pick up street scenes, to learn about, to build the algorithms. It's an extensive where I think we spent like 5 million kilometers just to driving, to pick up street scenes, to develop it. It's not possible to do to build that kind of reliability for a small micro factory. We put all this knowledge into the vehicles. And if you see what happens with manufacturers who fail, if you see the problems that are happening in the United States at the moment with GM and Honda and Toyota, I mean, you want to stay away from that. You want to make sure that, I mean, if you build millions of cars and there are 10 who fail, those 10 are written about in the media. The reliability you have to have is so high that you can't have any failures.
Damien, I'm sure I saw a wry smile on your face as he was speaking. I'm sure you want to respond.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your approach. And I think, yes, reliability is top of the list of what you have to take care of. Now, you went to those different locations and recorded 5 million kilometers for the tests. Basically, you were local. You went there to make sure that the car or the system was learning what the local environment was. And this is what we're looking after. This is what we want to promote, being local, having the ability to understand what the environment, what the infrastructure is locally, so that you can adapt the vehicles for the local market. We're not in a business of building a car that will be sold all over the world. We're in the business of sourcing talents all over the world to solve the local challenges and build locally relevant vehicles. So it's a different approach.
Okay, Rainer, did you want to
So
come
you're
in?
actually advocating like local test communities all over the world that would kind of help you with the type approval of a system like that?
Well, in terms of complying with the regulation, we will, of course, comply with the local regulation. But we'll also have the learnings from the network effect of what is being done in one part of the world and implement it in another.
Interesting
Let's just
concept.
see. I want to come back, if we have a couple of minutes, on this question of collaboration and co-creation, as you called it, and how effectively it's working. But let's take a last round of comments or questions. Yes, please, madam. Thank you very much. There we go. Can you reach across? Thank you.
Ariane Becker, I'm from the German Insurance Association, and as we are talking always about liability, I think at a certain point I have to say something on this. Well, it's for sure that liability might change and that the reasons for it might change, insurance might change, but there will be somewhere a liability. In motor insurance, there might be a shift from strict liability to no-fault liability. Wherever you do it, you will still have some damages in the road, at least for the period, unless all vehicles will be autonomous, or however you will call it, automated. So as long as you have the both types on the road, I'm afraid you will have accidents. We are in favor of road safety for sure, and that's the one point. We are thinking about how insurance products will shift, but well, you think of product liability, so there will be some insurance on the car, whoever is paying for this one, but don't just say it's going away.
Okay. Thank you. No, obviously a very, very important, very, very important issue for the future, and one we will come back to, and I'm very grateful for you because it was a missing element in our discussion. Any other last comments or questions before we try to draw some conclusions from this session? Okay, just 2 words, if you would, Damien, before I try to get you to identify a priority for the future. On this question of co-creation, any particular, everybody's talked about the importance of collaboration, cooperation. If we don't work together on this broad question of intelligent mobility for smart cities, we won't get there. Any particular challenges to do that? Any advice for people on how to really foster effective collaboration? Just quick thoughts on that, and then we'll draw some conclusions.
I think the main message that I would like to leave is to be open. There is a lot of companies starting to develop business models around ownership of data and making a business out of that data. And at Local Motors, we don't believe in that. All our information is open sourced. If you go to localmotors.com, you go on the website on the project pages of our different products. You have access to the CAD data, the bill of material, the how to put together your vehicle yourself. And we believe that being open is leaving the opportunity to external people to come and join the conversation, add more ideas, and come up with different approaches in solving a given challenge.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, you that will be music to your ears, that open access, that open sharing of data. But you raised this question earlier of a lot of new players in the game, a lot of different people involved. Just a reaction to what you've heard, and whether you think the collaboration, what's the key to making this collaboration really deliver for motorists in the future?
Well, I think, like said before, that consumers have to be made more aware of the advantages of connected, but I think that the producers, they have to be more aware of the advantages of working together. And I haven't seen this in the stories yet, that there is cooperation with more players, and that you can see the advantages of it.
So like the iMobility Challenge has brought together different organizations to raise awareness among consumers and among policymakers of the benefits, you think you almost need a matching process to make producers more aware of the need to work together.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And there are already existing alliances around that, around the Internet of Things, and the All-Scene Alliance, for example, which Local Motors is part of, with Cisco and IBM and Intel, I believe, are also part of, are part of those alliances, making sure that the standards that we're developing applications on are shared with the rest of the world.
Any other comments? That Rainer, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I can only chime in here. Standards are critical to preserve your investment, your initial investment. And when you look at innovation in the car, 80–90% of it is by software. And the automotive industry is just now embracing software and understanding software. So IT and automotive are coming together. Specifically for autonomous cars, we have a component from the server side through the networks, and we have a component in the local intelligence side. The challenge for the next 10 years until we will see the level 5 automatic driving is probably to make this all converge and be kind of watchful of developments in this area.
Okay, so that is the key challenge. I want to ask, and Anders, you can add something because I asked you this question in the first session or not. I mean, if you stick with what you said before. But in terms of a priority, that's a key challenge. That's probably one of the major areas where focus needs to be. But one priority for each of you, and as I started at this end with the first question, I will start at that end. If you had to identify one priority for action. It can be for policymakers to create that environment for innovation we've talked about. It can be for industry, whether it be the automotive industry, whether it be the intelligence industry, if I can put it broadly, the ICT industry. One priority to make sure that smart vehicles can really help to deliver all these benefits to intelligent mobility for smart cities. Anders.
And we love incentives. If governments, policymakers can give incentives for people to pick up on these technologies, that would be the best thing to do, because there are a lot of disincentives to do this. I mean, there are taxes who clearly are in favor of picking up the new technologies. In Sweden, for instance, we have taxes put on top of all the new technologies cost a bit extra money, and that's taxed twice. So you have taxes and then another taxes. Clearly disincentives. So if people are encouraged in order to encourage people to adopt these technologies, there should be no added taxes on it, or rather have incentives for people to encourage and pick up on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Damien, your priority.
Yeah, so that's about lowering the barrier to entry by lowering the cost. I think it is also about leadership. I've talked about it, and I think Rupert also talked about it. Setting a vision and sticking to it, not for the next couple of months, but for the next decade, to really implement the change, implement the innovations, and bring the fruits of those innovations to the people.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's going further than only looking for the standards. It's also a change of the data that motor vehicles from different brands can platoon, and not only the same brand in the platooning row. So it's far going, this challenge.
That openness is absolutely crucial there. Rainer.
Last words?
Your priority.
Okay, my priority is clearly the compute side of things. We clearly believe that intelligence can be manufactured by just putting more MIPS in place. I believe this is widely held opinion in the artificial intelligence community. The learning curve is essential, and here public mandates like NCAP. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with NCAP. This is the safety organization that awards stars to the safety elements of a car. NCAP is helping. They are making emergency braking worthy for a star, and that will pretty much bring emergency braking into new cars by maybe 2017. And that will drive the learning curve. These features will be everywhere. It will be not exotic high-level features that will never get any cheaper. They will get dramatically cheaper, and we will see also through the innovation curve of the semiconductor industry all the necessary compute elements become dramatically cheaper.
Thank you very much. Michel, you have the last word.
Okay. Difficult. I think the key element is awareness. Awareness, this is why the iMobility Forum is so important. Awareness of the buyers of the current cars. I'm pretty sure this was not in the survey done by iMobility. They were not asked, for example, if they know about emergency braking or lane keeping or stop-and-go driving. So people are not aware that these systems already exist in some cars, and actually the level of car is going down now where you can find these vehicles. There is some big ads right now in Paris about the Passat, who has stop-and-go automated driving. Yes, it's advertised on big panels in Paris, probably because there is a lot of stop-and-go driving. So it's awareness for the end user, but it's also awareness of the policymakers and especially the decision maker in the cities. Decision makers in the cities are not really aware of ITS at the moment. And we need some people with a vision. Some people have a vision of no car in the cities, but I don't believe in that. We have to have another vision, perhaps, more better sharing of the space, better utilization of the space, and I think this is where we will see these new services come from if we have this vision from the key stakeholders, especially the mayors of the cities. This is why City Mobile 2 is so important, because we bring these demonstrations in the cities.
Which links beautifully with what they're discussing in the other room. So I hope they have converged with us in the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed? Thank you so much.